folks. Hello and good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Time for Torah. We are excited to have everybody here with us. We are learning for a refuah shlema for Hershel ben Chaim ben Sheva, Ruth bat Sarah, Yitzchak ben Dvorah, Dina bat Mindel, Aaron Ber ben Gittel, Avram ben Shoshana, Dana ben Dvorah, Mai bat Sarah, Chaim David ben Esther, David ben Sophia, Lynn bas Basaleah, Naftali Hirsch ben Rachel, Azriel Aloin, Moshe ben Sarah, Basheba Bracha, Chai ben Sarah, Nachum ben Elisha, Celia, Mecholev ben Tzipor, Avram Shimon ben Sarah, Leah, Emmanuel ben Juliet, Herpet, Lillian, Binim ben Sarah. And we have in mind other people. If there's somebody you want to include in the prayers, please send us their name. And this class is also available to be sponsored at any time if somebody wants to specifically sponsor it in honor of a somebody, in memory of somebody, or for a refuah shlema, a complete healing for somebody. We are on chapter 30 in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We are learning the laws of speech. Just to recap, yesterday we discussed this interesting, it seems like an exclusion, but really we have to be very careful about it. This idea that if something is well known, then it can be discussed amongst people. And the idea being that when something happens in public and everybody knows about it, or it's been publicized, so one, by relating information, is no longer technically violating the prohibition of becoming a talebearer, because everybody knows it. And we say that the minimum number is if 3 people have heard it and know it or have seen it, right? Then, the matter is out. But I do want to reflect a little bit on what the Chofetz Chaim says about this. First of all, remember the Chofetz Chaim, he has probably the most stringent opinion on these things, but that's in the matters of laws of speech. But that's okay, that's good, because it's such a significant issue we should be thinking about. And he points out that some say even if 3 people have heard the information, still we're not supposed to discuss it. He based that on the Rambam, on Maimonides. And he says that there are other limitations on the license to use that information. And there are different conditions that can be met. Among what are the limitations? What would limit one from using that public information that had been related by 3 people? Only one of the original 3 is permitted to repeat the information, he says. Not anyone who heard it from one of them, right? So secondhand information now would be inadmissible, or you couldn't use it, I should say. You shouldn't relate it. If one of the 3 is very careful about speaking Lashon Hara, it's not permitted for any of them to repeat it. In other words, if one guy or gal is very strict about their speech, that would preclude the others from using that information. If one of the 3 is a relative or friend of the subject of the matter, we're not permitted to repeat it. So that's the Rambam and the Chofetz Chaim. And so there are those authorities who want us to be much more careful and not even discuss something which is well known. And he says, to quote the Chofetz Chaim from chapter 10 of his book, Sefer Chofetz Chaim Hilchos Lashon Hara, the laws of Lashon Hara. After all of these conditions and so forth that I've put out have been set forth, my friend, how much one should distance himself relying on this leniency of before 3 people, which has, he says, almost no practical application. For even if all the limitations and conditions will have been fulfilled, it's unclear whether the halacha follows this opinion or whether, and when according to the opinion of many authorities, there's no source for this leniency in the Gemara. So he says one who guards their shul should be very careful. So we see it constantly that we need to be careful about talking about others, and it's important to remind ourselves of this. And if one wants to go in depth, I highly recommend the book which has been created, the Chofetz Chaim Shmiras HaLashon book. It's a book which divides up all the laws of Lashon Hara. You can study a little bit each day or do it all in one shot. Let's continue with paragraph number 6, Vav. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. There's a Gemara in Sota which says, Rabbi Yirmiyah, the son of Abba, Arba chitois ein mekablois pnei shechina. There are 4 categories of ne'er-do-wells, of sinners, who do not merit to receive the divine presence. Kas leitzim, those who are scoffers. Kas chanefim, flatterers. Kas shikarim, the liars. U v'chas misapre lashon hara, those who relate lashon hara. And now he's going to bring a scriptural Torah support for all of these. He says, Kas leitzim, where do we know that scoffers don't merit to receive the divine presence? Dichsiv, as it's written in this is from Hosea, Mashach yado es lotzatzim. He withdrew his hand from the scoffers. Here's Rashi explains, Mashach adochash baruch hu miyais es lotzatzim. What does it mean, the words, he withdrew his hand? Who's he? This is referring to Hashem, blessed is Hashem, who withdraws from associating with scoffers. Kas chanafim, how do we know that the flatterers do not merit to receive the divine presence? Tichsiv, as it's written, Ki loy lefanav chanef yavo. This is from Eov. For before him no flatterers shall come. And again, him here is referring to Hashem. So flatterers, you don't get the divine presence either, says Reb Yirmiyah in the Gemara. What about the liars? I mean, it would seem obvious that they should have some kind of negative effect for their lying. Kas shkarim, those who are habitual liars, don't merit to receive the divine presence. As it says, Doiver shikarim lo yikon leneged einai. This is from Tehillim 101, 101st chapter. And the words of the Psalms are, one who tells lies shall not be established before my eyes. So one who is an habitual liar, and I point out habitual because somebody who maybe did it once, it's not so clear that that's going to impact them from ever receiving the divine presence. And also somebody who says a white lie, a permitted lie, one which the lie was said in order to save embarrassment to somebody, or because they don't want to relate information which is inappropriate to relate, and so they say or they don't say something, so that's not included. So this is a liar, right? Somebody who's saying a bold-faced lie. How do we know that they are not going to receive the divine presence? It says, Ki lo el chafetz resha ata lo yigurcha ra. You are not a God who desires wickedness. Evil cannot abide with you. This is also from Tehillim chapter 5. Perish Rashi. What does Rashi say on this? He says, Lo yigurish ra. What does it mean, Lo yigurcha ra? Lo yagur imcha ra. Evil cannot abide with you, Hashem. And that one is right. Hashem and evil, oil and water. Somebody's habitual liar, or anybody who's doing, they're just, Hashem has no patience, doesn't want to hang out. And what about those who say Lashon Hara? How do we know that they don't receive the divine presence? It's written in the passage above, verse 10, same chapter of Tehillim 5. Ki ein bepihu nechoina, for there is no sincerity on their lips. Tzaddik ata Hashem lo yigur b'migurecha ra. So we could append the verse and say it like this: You, Hashem, are righteous. Therefore, evil cannot dwell in your abode. And if you look in the Gemara and Sota, all of this is written out. Our sages of blessed memory said on this. In the Gemara in Sanhedrin, we're jumping to another book of the Talmud. Kol litzanas asura. All mockery is forbidden. Bar mileitzanusa de avdus ililim, except the mockery of idol worship. Dichsiv, as it's written, vahi betzarim, vayhatel bahem Eliyahu. And it was at noontime Eliyahu ridiculed. So remember the famous story with the prophets of Baal and Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Elijah. He mocks these folks, and that's okay. You're allowed to mock or ridicule, let's say, the prophets of Baal. Those were the prophets of idol worship who were challenging him. So it's pretty well established that those who speak Lashon Hara don't really have an audience with Hashem. We continue. Number 7. Hanoikim bechaveru, somebody who is acting out revenge upon somebody else. Oiver belas, I said, they violate a negative commandment, which we learned previously, right? Shenemar, as it says, loy sikom, right? Don't take revenge. So what is the revenge specifically that Torah is speaking about? This is one of my favorites here. What is the revenge, right? Because we normally think about revenge like in this dramatic, movie sense, right? I will, avenge my family, and they go and they kill other people. What is revenge? Revenge is a much more subtle thing, and we all are very familiar with this when you hear it. Ketzad hi hanekima. What is the Torah talking about when it says don't take revenge? Amar lechaveru, one says to their friend, Mashileni kardumcha, could you lend me your axe? Amar loy eini mashliach, I'm not going to give you my axe. Lemachar haya chaveru tzarich lishol. The next day, the other guy comes, your friend comes back to you, right? The person who had refused your request for the axe. Okay, and he says, Amar loy chaveru, hashileni kardumcha. He says, could I borrow your axe? Okay. Amar loy eini mashliach. The first man says, I'm not lending it to you. Kamoshe ata loy hishlatani kasher shaltani memacha. Just as you didn't lend it to me when I asked, I'm not going to lend to you when you ask. Harezeh noikem v'ayver belav. A person who does such a form of revenge has violated, right, refusing to lend because the other guy at the time refused to lend, has violated a negative commandment. Right? We're not allowed to take revenge for refusal of any kind of monetary favors. And the same would go, let's say I asked to borrow money from somebody and they said no, and they came to borrow money from me. I'm not supposed to say no because it's a mitzvah to loan something to somebody. Unless you know that this person is no good for the money, that's a whole nother story. Perhaps you could, that's another discussion. So rather, what should you do? What's the right way to respond? Yiten belev shalem, he should give it to the person wholeheartedly. You shouldn't treat him the way you were treated. Rather, it's proper for a person, you should relinquish measures of retribution, right? You should just don't take revenge with regard to anything related, because if we think that this world is everything, So then we get very upset about all the little material things of our lives. But if we realize that this is like a prose story, and my mother was relating this yesterday, 2 days ago, she was saying how her mother used to say that her father, so i.e. my mother's grandfather, who was the only rabbi we know of in our in either side of my family. So he used to say that this world is just a corridor, right? Which is a famous idea brought down in many sources, right? That this is a prose door. Our world is a corridor. The real world, Olam Emes, the real world is the world of Olam Haba, and this material world is just a temporary situation. So we need to anything regarding this temporal world. We shouldn't take we don't make such a big deal out of these little things. Because for those who really chapit, as we say in Yiddish, those who really understand, everything in this world is on some level vanity and worthless. And it sounds pretty stark, but in other words, that right, the riches of this world and the vanity of this world is all very temporal. And so when something's temporal, it doesn't have much worth. And it's not worth taking revenge, right? Because mitzvos, keeping the mitzvos are eternal, and your connection to them are eternal, and the reward for them is eternal. David HaMelech says, peace be upon him, in Tehillim number 7, Im Gamalti Shloimi Ra V'Achatza, etc. So he says, let me be punished if I've ever repaid evil with those who treated me badly. I rescued my tormentors, right? So there's a famous story that David restrained his followers from killing Shaul, even though Shaul had been after him, as we spoke about. Shaul wanted to kill him. So we learned from that you can't even somebody wanted to kill you, you can't turn around and kill them or take retribution and revenge against them. Now, granted, David HaMelech was a very elevated character, and it doesn't mean we have to befriend somebody who wanted to kill us, right? It doesn't mean they have to become our BFF, right? What we're just trying to say is that there's no gain from taking revenge, because, and again, this would come under the notes, my notes to the text. We learn in other places, of course, that right, mida keneged mida, Hashem is the ultimate measurer of what happens to folks. And so if there's one person who acted in an unfair, improper manner to you, so we have to believe that Hashem, if they acted in an unjust way, Hashem will take care of that, right? We don't use the word karma. We have a word, we say measure for measure. Like a person acts, so they will be acted upon. And that is a good reason. Another reason why taking revenge is not permitted, because it's as if to say Hashem didn't see what happened. Right? We're talking about serious cases here. Hashem didn't see what happened. Of course Hashem saw. Hashem sees everything. When I'm referring to serious cases, I mean that where there's so much of a passion, a person wants to really take revenge, right? All the more so we have to hold back and not do it. I wish everybody an awesome, wonderful day, and we look forward to being together again. Halacha will continue next week, please God, on Monday, and tune in Friday for